Welcome to the Firefly Tutors TV podcast, where real teachers from all over the country discuss real solutions for parents and educators alike. Here's your host, Marissa Johnston.
Hello and welcome to The Buzz, brought to you by Firefly Tutors TV, where we talk to administrators, educators, and parents all across the country about current topics affecting school children today. Welcome to the podcast, Melissa Loble. Melissa has spent 20 years in the educational technology world, working for a number of technology suppliers and educational institutions, as well as teaching leadership courses on managing technology for educational change. Melissa earned her M.A. in Educational Policy from Teachers College, Columbia University, and an M.B.A. from the Columbia Business School. Today, we are discussing how ChatGPT is changing the landscape for high school and college students. Thank you so much for joining us, Melissa.
It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Marissa.
Tell us a little bit more about you, your background in education, and your work with Instructure.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you for asking. So as you heard, as you were walking through a little bit of my bio there, I've spent my entire career in educational technology and largely education as a whole. I started out as a classroom high school teacher in New York City, loving to work with students, but in a very face-to-face environment. And then educational technology really started to surface. Online learning became a thing. And I shifted into supporting both universities as well as educational technology vendors and how they can think about delivering really meaningful, impactful learning using online tools. And I've stayed there ever since. I'm currently the Chief Customer Experience Officer for a company called Instructure. Probably folks know us most as the makers of Canvas, a learning management system that's been around about the last 10 years or so. And in that role, I get to work with our customers every single day to help them find the best ways to impact student learning and student outcomes. Whether we're helping teachers, we're helping the school districts, we're helping the administrators and universities, it's all about how do we bring the best learning to students. And this topic today is a big one. It's really creating a lot of conversation in the educational space across the K-20 curriculum.
Awesome. Very cool. I know, when I first started teaching, it really felt like those were the years that all of the technology was just kind of thrown at us and we were told, have fun with it. But there wasn't as much structure. So I'm really excited to hear more about Instructure and just how it's supporting students and, lifelong learners even, and definitely where ChatGPT falls into this. So with that, how has the introduction of ChatGPT changed the landscape for high school and college students in terms of academic support and learning resources?
Yeah, that's a really great place to start. ChatGPT, as an example of a language learning model, has actually been around for a little while. It's actually since, the last 8 years. But what's most interesting is it's become accessible to teachers and students in the last 6 months. That's because there's actual user interfaces where people can go use it. And you don't need any kind of technical experience to do that. Well, that's really now caused both a lot of questions in the educational space, as well as a lot of ideas to surface about what could be the benefits and even the challenges of using tools like ChatGPT in a learning environment. So it's been really interesting to watch something that's been around and people have been playing with create such a buzz and kind of shake things up in a lot of ways in the space. From how is it being discussed? We can start there. There's a lot of questions around its use, and particularly its use related to academic integrity. The first place people went is cheating. Is there an opportunity to use these tools to cheat? What happens with my quizzes? If a student can go get information and get the answers to my quizzes, and I'm doing these quizzes online, is that valid way to assess or understand if students are building skills? And then it went into privacy, the conversations around how can we protect learner identity and learner information and teacher information and even content and intellectual property. But then at the same time, like I said, it's opening up all sorts of productivity opportunities, giving you, I mean, you were in the classroom, Marissa, giving you more opportunities to engage with your learners as opposed to have to do all that administrative stuff. And there's so much out there related to this that's really giving education some interesting opportunities to make some pretty profound change.
Yeah, certainly. And I feel like leaning into it is better than avoiding it altogether. And like you mentioned, learning how to hone it for its practicality, I mean, even just like learning management platforms and everything where you assign something to a student and it does the grading for you. Great. That frees up, like you mentioned, your time to be able to focus on student needs. And the same thing can kind of come of students working with ChatGPT to support them in their assignments too. If we treat it as a tool, it could be very beneficial.
Absolutely. I love that perspective. And that's what we're really, I'm really encouraging teachers. I understand that it's scary, but at the same time, leaning into what it can bring and giving a moment for us to reflect on our own practice. So if you think about, like you shared, productivity, think about building quizzes. Okay. I have a topic. I'm going to teach a history topic, and maybe it's World War II. And I want to create an assessment that's pretty comprehensive, lots of questions. And it actually wouldn't matter if students cheated as much, if you want to call it cheating, but it's more about a student going in there and asking themselves questions and reflecting on those questions.
Yes.
That takes a lot of time to build. Like, think about every question, and then you need to have the right answer, and then four distracting answers. And, to do that in a really meaningful way, that's a lot of work. When really all the teacher's trying to do is give the student a moment to reflect on, do I understand, the fundamental experiences during World War II? So having tools like ChatGPT do simple things like that, help you build these assessments. Or I teach a course, I teach adults, I teach a course on how to build interactive e-learning. And in that course, I actually can have it help me build really good discussion prompts. You're always creative as a teacher, but you can always use some extra creative juice or extra creative help.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That builds so much time, right? Think about all of that, those kinds of applications, and leaning into it is how you find those.
Well, and not only that, but you just made me remember those nights where I would be wide awake at 3 a.m, coming up with, like, all of a sudden that's when creativity decided to strike.
Yep.
That might, something like ChatGPT will put it behind you. You already completed it. It's a task done. So that's awesome. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that task done approach too, that so if you think about content creation, you think about building your course, I also think about things like sample work. Students always need really good sample work. And if we're going to move to more of like a project-based learning approach, which I think is something that ChatGPT is also going to force in a good way, because no longer can we do kind of the rote assessments. Again, is that really displaying the skills that students are learning? So let's say we do more project-based work. You need examples. That's really hard as a teacher. You're trying to go out there and not only build the assessment or the assignment. I do a 5-step assignment, but for me to go take all of that time to give 3, 4, 5 different examples of work, when I could just, give some good examples, share it with ChatGPT, and then they can produce example responses that I can edit and then share with my students so that they're guided in how they should be producing this work and how they should be thinking about these complex problems and projects. So it's like stuff like that too is just a gold mine. Again, leaning into it gives you this chance to get students opportunities to dig deeper into the learning because you're able to take that extra administrative work off the table.
Oh, sure. And wherever all of my perfectionist educators are at out there, if you're listening, this is the tool for you, because honestly, Melissa, what you're describing, it reminds me again of me sitting at my computer hour after hour trying to find those really rich examples to provide to students and coming up short. A lot of them just didn't meet my standards of what I expected of my students. So then I would kind of resort to creating it myself. And that's still more time spent away from actually educating students.
Yeah. Yeah. Students want feedback from you. That's
Yes.
as a teacher. And even if you're doing some of this work with your kids at home as a parent, they want to hear, they want your insights into how well did I do? What am I missing? Like that's where you want to spend your time. And so again, building these examples or taking this administrative burden off gives you that space to really engage and give rich feedback. I'm grading my assessments right as we speak. And I think about just the time that I'm able to take to do that because I can offload these other tasks. And I've already gotten, I do midterm feedback with my students, and I've already gotten feedback. This is the most, this is great. You're coaching me, you're directing me.
Yeah.
Thank you for the help here. They're not going to compliment me on my nice assessment you built, right? They don't care about that piece. They want my thoughts on the work that they're doing.
Yes, certainly. And you mentioned that feedback component, and I'm curious here. Would you say that that's really what sets ChatGPT apart as a tool more so than, because I know there's a lot of buzz out there too, pun intended, of, people worried that things like AI are going to take over their jobs. But you do bring up a really good point of the mentoring factor and the feedback factor that teachers do provide, or educators in this case, for all of our homeschooling families too.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, that human connectedness. And if we learned anything through the pandemic and teaching, it's that is so valuable in the student's journey, the development journey. Having humans around you, that socialization, that education of the whole child, the mental well-being alongside the awareness of you as a learner, right? A 10-year-old understanding, oh, not only do I get this topic, but I understand how I learned that. So I can learn how to be a learner, down the road. All of that, ChatGPT can't do that. AI is not doing that. It's not that human piece that people are so afraid of. Would it be replaced? So I don't think it's going to do that. It's just going to allow us to, using your phrase again, lean in. It's going to allow us to lean in more to that whole child, and then allow ChatGPT to be the support structure, tutoring. I think about, so when I taught high school, I had an assignment where I had students build a newsletter from a certain era, and they would have to go in and do like articles, and it was like a newspaper journal kind of thing. And you had to do articles and images, and, that's time consuming. And what I really want my students to do is to reflect on the trends of that time period.
Yes.
And what would it be like to live in that time period? I don't need them to build beautiful graphics, or I don't need them to know how to build a newspaper layout necessarily. Well, gosh, ChatGPT can do all of that, right? So now it's leaned in, it's helped students, it's supported, it's tutored, it's been there as a structure behind the scenes for students so that they can lean into also that social experience in what they're learning and connect all those dots. And then the teacher's there again to support that whole child experience as they're working through that.
I love that. And, there's a part of me that is hearing people say, but kids need to know how to do those things too. They need to know how to structure or format their newsletters. They need to know this, they need to know that. And I ask, do they? Or can we use this tool, can we teach them how to properly use the new tools that are available to them to, again, manage that productivity and empower them to get more out of what they're doing?
Yeah, you're spot on. Because think about the workplace. We're all, to a certain degree, embracing it. Of course, there's concerns around data and privacy and things like that. So we'll work through those pieces. But I mean, I can't think of the number of colleagues that I've worked with that said, oh yeah, that business paragraph that I had to write, or that mission statement, I ran that through ChatGPT as a starter to help me get going. Or, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem in a discipline I don't have any experience in. I asked ChatGPT some questions, and it really helped me get at some fundamentals. Or I was in that business meeting and they used an acronym and I had no idea what that was. And rather than just Google search it, I asked ChatGPT and it immediately gave me the contextualized answer for that. Awesome. That's what students need to learn. That's what our kids need to learn. because that's how they're going to be working in the workplace when they transition out of their education experiences. So I could not agree with you more. Asking ourselves, what skills do you need versus what skills don't you need? And is ChatGPT really disrupting that or just highlighting that so that we can focus on the truly essential skills to be successful in work, successful in education, and successful in our communities?
Mm-hmm. And I do pose this thought to our listeners too of imagine, well, not even imagine, really think back to what you learned in school and the new technology that has come about since then. If you did, we'll just continue to learn to use this term. If you did lean into it, where are you at today and how has it helped you be more successful? If you didn't lean into it, do you wish that you had, because I remember reading this story and it really stuck with me of someone who got a really, nice, good, well-paying job to essentially Google everything. And it's because generationally there was a huge difference and disconnect between who was hiring them and how they were brought up. They saw it as a simple task. Well, I just Googled it. The people that hired them said, we don't know where to begin with Google. So I feel like ChatGPT is really one of those shifts that we're seeing now where, teaching students how to embrace it and really make the most out of it is going to be the best thing for them in their future going forward.
Absolutely. I love that challenge and that thinking about it in that way. I mean, I think about the same of data analytics skills. Pretty much they're saying anybody needs to be able to analyze data and have a baseline of analytical skills in order to be successful, regardless, whether you're going into, whether you're teaching, whether you're going to be in business, whether you're going to be an engineer, doesn't matter. And I think about that as a similar set of skills. They're now saying that, and I really agree with this. ChatGPT being able to build good prompts is going to be a skill set that's learned. Just like that, how to Google something or curate resources, just like that, how to unpack data and analyze that data. It's yet going to be another skill. How do you ask AI meaningful prompts to get at the most valuable information and to also get the best output from that? I think that's really going to change and they talk about that as a new skill set that people need. It's also like digital literacy. I think about this in my mother. She's in her late 70s and she still thinks everything she reads on the internet is accurate. And and it's there's still people out there, and it's the same thing. It's like, we've taught our kids digital literacy now and how to understand and curate and evaluate meaningful content that you get. Now you need that skill of how do you ask for it? How do you develop it? How do you prompt it out of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, and in a way that's going to meet your needs and what you are looking to do, what you're looking to provide. Because sure, I could go in there and ask a random question, but what I need is something formatted for parents, who I mainly communicate with, and it may have spit something out that's formatted in a law type of way, so it is a skill in and of itself to be able to work with ChatGPT and get it to put out what you need entirely. So I'm really glad that you put it that way as well.
Yeah. And I think you also touched on, perhaps some of the challenges, because part of knowing how to ask it the right questions is also how to protect yourself. There can be bias, there can be hallucination in ChatGPT and the kinds of answers if you don't know how to ask it the right questions. So it's also, while it's helping you be more productive, it's also helping you protect your own understanding or your own skill building or even what you bring out there to the world.
Can you elaborate more on that with the hallucination and the issues that can come of it? I'm unfamiliar with some of it.
Sure. So from a hallucination perspective, when AI in general and ChatGPT, when it doesn't have answers, it can make up answers. The simple way. And so it's trained. These language learning models are trained on the information in the internet, and it's trained only up to a certain period of time. Now, the latest version of ChatGPT is outdo any kind of week now, and it should be current through 2023. But right now, ChatGPT, the current version of it is really only updated till 2022. So if you go ask it questions about facts in 2023, it may say it doesn't know, or it may make up things depending on how you prompt that. So it's hallucinating. And so you can get really creative in how you ask prompts. You can actually teach it to do some hallucination. You can give it some information that's not factual, and it'll fold it into factual information. And if you don't know that you're doing that, you've suddenly now led yourself down a path of not real information. You're not curating it correctly.
Oh, wow.
So you have to be a little bit careful. You can also, there's some students, of course, kids out there and adults out there that have taught it to be emotional or a little angry or feisty or talk like a pirate or those kinds of things. Depending on how you set up prompts, you can manipulate ChatGPT, like you were saying, to do things for yourself that aren't always positive. So this is, again, we're building that like digital literacy skill, but the ChatGPT or AI skill is going to be really important so students don't find themselves going down those paths. Those are some of the pitfalls of it, and we want to protect students against that for sure.
And that would just come in with teaching them how to utilize the tool, is also teaching them the possibilities of, like you mentioned, the hallucinations, the making up its own answers, and learning, of course, to check your work, fact check, go through, that sounds a little off. I'm going to go and check this other reputable source and make sure that that's correct. Cause I don't think Jack Sparrow showed up, was part of the election or, whatever.
Exactly. And that's the kind of thing you could teach it to do depending on how you ask questions and the information you fed it. So totally agree.
Funny. I mean, for creative writing, that sounds amazing.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point, the creativity. So there's a lot of concern that it's going to be the death of creativity. And, we were talking about this earlier in our conversation. I think it's actually going to be a rebirth of creativity, because there are people that are very creative with like a blank page. Give me nothing to start with and I will build something beautiful. That is not me. Give me something to start with. Like I need some text, or I need a visual, or I need ideas, and then I can get really creative and turn that into something. So let's help bolster creativity with everyone. And I think that also can come from good uses of ChatGPT and other tools like it.
Yeah, certainly. And just giving, like you mentioned, giving someone a place to start, because like you give me a blank page and it will stay blank for the longest time, because I will just be in like a writer's block situation. Even artistically, I can't draw. If you give me a blank page, I'm going to draw a sun in the corner and hills on the ground. That's it. That's all you're getting out of me, But just also, it seems like it creates kind of an even playing field, because there are students who may struggle with writing in general. They may struggle to get their thoughts onto a page. So to have a place that can start for you and then take ideas from it, sure, but turn them into your own, and a lot of people tend to be concerned, well, what about creativity? What about it? Where is creativity? Because, and this is not to bash anything or anyone by any means, but a lot of the movies, a lot of the stories being told are all loosely based off ones that have come before. There are hardly original plot lines these days. There are new characters, but we follow the hero's journey, or Romeo and Juliet. It's a lot of the same stuff. So I really appreciate what you're saying, where this may be a new kind of rebirth to creativity, because it might just give someone a whole different inspiration.
Absolutely. And think about those voices that you're inspiring that we might not have ever heard from. So, I have some friends that have kids with special needs, and they talk about, again, that blank page creation. Their kids would never be able to start there at all. In fact, they need a fair amount of help to get there. But what could blossom from that help is a voice and a perspective, and even new ideas that we may never have been able to surface because they could never get started, or they could never communicate in the same way that, your average student could communicate in. So that equity, you talked about that a little bit. It creates a level playing field, or some equity in learning as well, because it allows everybody to rise from the place that they start, as opposed to all the same starting place. And then I don't know, maybe I'm rosy-eyed and all of this, but I just think we're going to see so much more interesting art, so much more interesting, to your point, stories, movies, content, so much more interesting approaches. And that's not even touching science, and where it can really help bolster science, as we develop these kinds of tools and we make them more and more accessible to everyone.
Yes. Oh, I love it. So you mentioned earlier one of your tasks that you had your students do was kind of like a newsletter report. So going along with that, what are some other examples of how students can effectively utilize ChatGPT to enhance their understanding of complex subjects or improve their writing skills, or both?
Yeah. So, there's two buckets. There's one of helping students use it as a checker, or somebody that's giving you feedback before your teacher. So that can go into any discipline. Coding, it's being used quite a bit to check coding. So if you're interested in developing programs, it can help you learn that faster and show you where your mistakes are. Writing. I love to write, but I am a horrible typer. And I make all sorts of mistakes. I didn't learn typing. I skipped that class. It was not offered at my school. And so just even cleaning up all the forms versus from that I've accidentally typed, things like that. It gives me that, from a writing perspective, that ease, that I'm not stressed about where my skills aren't, but that I can bring my ideas and that it can help coach me or edit me or clean me up. So those kinds of opportunities. And then there's the whole separate bucket of, I'm in a subject and it's assuming that I already know something. So let's say I'm in a math class and it's assuming I understand properties of triangles, and I don't remember that, or that didn't sink in. But my current teacher is not stopping to reteach me properties of triangles. Well, I can go in and ask ChatGPT to help me through a problem, and it can coach me or show me or teach me how to actually use those triangle properties that I completely forgot. So there's this, it can edit me, and then there's this, it can tutor me on things outside of what I either already know or remember, so that I can get better at or dig more deeply into the more complex stuff that my teacher is putting in front of me. So it can really go either way. And then the third one is, so many students have challenges with managing their own tasks in front of them. There's a productivity challenge. It's like, how do I manage my work? How do I know where I go next? And there's a lot of productivity tools that could surface, that are already starting to surface, to just direct students in, okay, you need to get this project done. Here's where you start, and here are the concrete steps that you need to take, and reminders and prompts to go do those steps in that logical order to get you to that end result. Because that's not a skill that everyone's born with or develops early on. Definitely. And you can get lost in the learning if you don't have somebody there nudging you through each of those steps.
Well, and imagine the fear in that learner when they've missed step 1 and the teacher's on step 10.
Yep, exactly.
You're
deflated. You could give up.
And a lot of them do.
They do. Yeah. And it doesn't get caught, right? Teachers, oh my gosh, I am just blown away by everything that you've continued to do. And, but you're so busy. There's so much work that you're doing and you're being asked to do more and more. You don't necessarily catch that they're stuck on one and they've given up until it could be too late. The parents, same thing. You're not seeing those steps. You're often seeing a final grade, or when your child is so frustrated that they come to you or you see the emotions that they can't get through those next steps. That's what you see. But that also could be too late. Can you imagine having tools behind the scenes that are just saying, hey, this is your next step. Let's chunk this small. Let's make this doable to get you to where you want to go and where you need to go in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And, sometimes when we see a problem as it has snowballed and we see the end result, we don't necessarily, really good detective skills come into play here, because some of the best teacher detectives out there, educator detectives, will trace it all the way back to them missing the first step, catch it, and go, oh, no big deal. Here's how we do this. Others will kind of go around and try to see, well, why did you struggle with this so bad? And they won't catch that it was just the first step that they were missing. They'll kind of go down all these different paths of, well, let's test you for this and that and these things and try to figure out what is this going, what's going on. But it could just be as simple as they just missed the first step, and now ChatGPT is here to come in and say, hey, let me nudge you along here. Just do this. Okay, now you're ready for part 2. And it sounds like learners can use it to kind of set their own pace too, a little bit, which is really nice.
Oh yeah, it personalizes. So this is the other thing, especially as vendors in the space, as people, technology supporting and thinking about how to use ChatGPT in our own platforms. This is exactly where I think a sweet spot could surface. It's not only nudging that student and helping them chunk it, but it's also showing that to the teachers and the parents really visibly, like, hey, here, it was just step 1 that they missed. That's all it was. And, and here's an automated, personalized thing that we saw you miss step 1. Go back here and just watch this video. This should help you. This is a supplementary video. Or go ask yourself these 3 questions. Write these 3 answers down on a piece of paper, and that will turn into step 1. So it creates this personalized learning journey, which I think is so exciting, because students are already naturally doing this. They're already off there, using ChatGPT, using Google, using all sorts of resources outside the learning experience to build their own knowledge to succeed. Many students are doing this. Well, let's make that easier for them. Let's build those personalized pathways. And that's been hard. It's a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of time. But with things like ChatGPT and other language learning models, you could really create these personalized journeys for students that just move them faster through their learning and inspire and excite them potentially about topics that maybe they never would have been, because they were challenging to get there. But once they got there, they're like, oh my gosh, I love biology. But wow, I could not understand some of the basic STEM, cycle functions or whatever. It's just, that's exciting too.
Yes. I'm thinking of high school me in chemistry. Chemistry intrigued me so much, and I wanted to know so much about it, but I couldn't grasp some of it, just not the way it was being delivered to me. It wasn't in a way that was conducive to my learning style. So maybe ChatGPT would have saved me as a student, but then maybe it would have set me on a different path. So I'm glad to be where I'm at today. So, but, still, regardless, that is just so great to hear, because I know a lot of times too, an educator's panic comes in, how do I differentiate for all of the learning needs of my students? And that can count at home too. Homeschooling parents may have various children who all learn differently and need different things. And maybe their oldest picked up a topic like that, and the parents went, oh, good, my kids won't need any help in this. And then their youngest is struggling.
Exactly. And it's hard to differentiate. And sometimes it's hard because you don't know how to differentiate. You need help.
A little kid isn't able to tell you, no, I don't learn this way. I learn that way.
Yeah. Oh, can you imagine though, if we can surface, like if through this little kids can start to figure out how they learn? I mean, what a skill and a vocabulary to have going into junior high, into high school, even into college, to say, I know I learn this way, I don't learn this way, and I'm going to create my paths that align that so I can be most successful. That in and of itself, so empowering.
Powerful. Yes, absolutely. And I know you mentioned earlier, especially with your properties of a triangle example, that ChatGPT gives students the ability to kind of have it explained to them. Right. And I know this is kind of another area where people go, no, red alert, that's cheating. But I will say, and don't cancel me for this, as a teacher, I used to give my students the answers, not spoon feed them, not say, well, no, this is actually the answer, little one. I would say, here are the problems. Here's the answer key. I want you to work to find that answer. If the work you're doing doesn't result in that answer, I'll support you.
Yep.
That's a tool. That's being able to reverse engineer the problem and figure out the solution.
Absolutely. I did the same thing. You and I are so aligned. I did open book exams, always.
Yes.
And I had to teach to not only the content, I taught history, not only the content, but also to make sure students could be successful on the state exams. Yes. And I used to get so much grief for, if you're doing open book exams, they're never going to be able to be prepared for those state exams. I don't get a book for those. And my students did well because they understood not only how to reverse engineer, but they learned it, right? It's how I always think about this. I still take notes on paper. It's crazy. But if I write it down on paper and then I type it in some note-taking tool that I might be using and I say it out loud to myself, I've now remembered that. If all I do is write it down, I've not necessarily remembered that. So that reverse engineering adds that step as well, right? It's not only I'm trying to remember and parsing apart this question. Okay, I go to this area. I know it relates to this time, this era, or this topic. I got to go find that. I got to go find that quickly enough because, I don't have unlimited time on this. And then I need to apply what says in that book back to the learning. That process has dug in those neural pathways even deeper. And that's how you remember things as well.
Oh, yeah. And the making of connections. So like you described where the kids had to go to a certain section. They had to know it was in a certain time period to find the section, to find their answer. Right. And so now they have even more connections to that bit of information. So when they do see it pop up on a test, no matter how it's going to be asked, because goodness knows they never ask it the same way twice, they will remember, okay, I know that happened somewhere in the 1950s. Oh, what was going on at that time? All of a sudden, they have all these other directions to come to that answer from. Right. So that is fantastic. And I agree. I did struggle with testing kids in a way that I knew life would never test them.
Yes.
In what world do I not have access to Google to find my answer? So I'd rather equip them with those tools and the know-how and checking, fact checking and going through references and stuff to make sure it's legitimate. But I'd rather equip them with that than to memorize things. Your brain can be used in so many different ways than to just memorize your math facts.
Oh, completely. And it does exactly, I so agree. It does exactly what you're talking about too. It creates those connections. It allows you to be a complex thinker and it allows you to problem solve. And if anything, we use every single day in our lives, it's problem solving. Yes. Whether it's a simple thing that you're trying to fix in your house to a more complicated, a life event that's happening to you, you are problem solving. And being able to do that with multiple disciplines of content in your mind is so valuable just as a life skill.
If you enjoyed our discussion today, please like Firefly Tutors on all your social media hubs like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Find us on Pinterest where we pin all of our favorite resources for parents and tutors. At Firefly Tutors, we believe every student deserves the opportunity to develop to their highest potential. See you next time on The Buzz.